Hello and welcome. I am live from Pellam's Wasteland, and today I have another episode of Pellam's Wasteland Reads for you all, this time covering two books that I read recently. Um, the first is The Sons of El Rey by Alex Espinoza, and the second, You Dreamed of Empires by Alvaro Enrigue. And hopefully I've pronounced the names all right. But these are two that I read recently. Goodreads does now, I guess. I don't know if they've done it before, but I found out about it recently. So I'm going to assume that it at least, it at least is happening now. These kind of specific challenges with like a particular category and a list of books that fit that particular category. And that's been, I feel like, good for me. Finding some things that I probably wouldn't have read otherwise, or at least wouldn't have read right away otherwise. Um, and both of these come not originally from, well, I guess Sons of El Rey. I found out about through that, and then You Dreamed of Empires. I had wanted to read anyway, and I had just sort of had it down, deep on the list somewhere, and then was reminded of it and thought, oh well, I should read that one because I had wanted to read it, and so I did. And I liked both of these. I think I liked You Dreamed of Empires a little bit more of the two, but I thought they were both really great and totally worth reading. So let me tell you a bit about them. So the Sons of El Rey is a multi-generational family saga. The story follows this family starting off in Mexico City, and then they move to Los Angeles and end up living there. And the story is told kind of non-linearly, where we are getting a section of each character's experiences at different times. And the sort of main three characters are the three generations of men, essentially the grandfather and the father, and then the adult son, the youngest. And between all three of these, we get a sort of different perspective on a number of the events, and a sort of gradually expanding understanding of the sort of scope of the story. But there are a couple of other characters. The essentially grandmother, the grandfather's wife, is also a character, and then another character is El Rey Coyote, who is the lucha libre luchador character of the grandfather, and then is sort of reignited also as El Rey Coyote Jr., who is the father's lucha personality also. So the story ends up being about this family, all these three, well, not just these three men, but specifically from the perspective of these three men and their experiences. It's very much a story that has to do with the kind of attempts to uh, expand horizons, and this idea of the immigrant experience in particular, them coming to the United States from Mexico and working on trying to establish a better life for themselves and their families, and all of this kind of difficult family drama between these men, which is sort of centered on the kind of present day of the grandfather Ernesto, who is dying. He's in hospice care. he's at the end of his life and is still sort of hanging on a little bit, and that's sort of the most kind of present time period. And so his experiences, his story is all looking back at things much earlier. And then his son's story, Vega, not Vega, Freddie, Freddie Alfredo, is looking back at not quite as earlier, and then all the way up to the kind of modern day Julian, who is mostly experiencing kind of present day things. There's a little bit of kind of backstory for him, and he's the kind of mid-20s son, who is the youngest of these three. And yeah, the result is a really kind of an interesting story about these kind of family dynamics and the sort of struggle of these people to try to make better lives for themselves, and also as the kind of connection of the love of luchador wrestling and this particular kind of cultural experience, and some stuff about like surviving the pandemic and kind of the aftermath of COVID that is interesting. It's a kind of a thing that, because I don't read that many new books, and don't read that many stories that are set in the contemporary world for new books, it's always an interesting reminder of kind of the things that a lot of the stories set today are wrestling with, I suppose, on some level. This idea of the you know, experiences of pandemic and lockdown and all that sort of stuff, and there's a fair bit of the kind of present day struggles of the family have to do with the you know, the small business, the gym that they own that is in trouble and all of that sort of stuff. And so that's an interesting other little kind of wrinkle that all kind of comes together in this grand kind of sweeping story about the fortunes of these people, these lovable but flawed characters who are doing their best in an imperfect world, and are also wrestling and struggling and all that sort of stuff. And it's great. It's a lot of fun. So that's the Sons of El Rey, second book on this video. You Dreamed of Empires. You Dreamed of Empires is historical fiction about the brief period of the conquistadors under Hernan Cortez reaching Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztec Mexica Empire. And then before things have, shall we say, popped off, eventually, of course, the conquistadors will kidnap Moctezuma, the emperor. I guess it's, you know, complicated. He has specific titles in Nahuatl that I frankly do not remember, and probably would barely be able to pronounce if I did. So sorry to the you know, ancient Mexican people about that one. But the sort of eventual, you know, conquest of Mexico is the assumed future of this, right? Eventually the Spanish conquistadors are going to take over all this. I read Camilla Townsend's the Fifth Son, and liked it a lot, and that's a historical work that covers kind of all through that material. But this is historical fiction about these characters, about their experiences in the world. And it is really fascinating. It's this kind of culture clash, and it is a style of historical fiction that I think is really interesting. There was a discussion that I remember reading years ago that talked about this idea of the historical in fiction. I think specifically in terms of film in this case, but it applies to literature as well. Of the tension between emphasizing the alien strangeness of the other cultures, other worlds, other ideas, all these things that we are not familiar with, and on the other hand, emphasizing the unity of the human experience, right? The idea that, like, well, people still care about their families, people still, struggle between doing the right thing and doing easy things, and all of these kind of considered sort of constants in the overall experience of the world, that lend themselves to this sense of unity, right? That the people of these other periods and other cultures are not so different from us. They care about a number of similar things. They just kind of do it in a different way, all that sort of stuff. And I think at its best, historical fiction is able to sort of have its cake and eat it too, in being able to kind of emphasize the uniqueness of a culture, the all of the ways that something is very different from our own lives, while also allowing us to understand the kind of human nature elements, for lack of a better term. This idea of the kind of unifying elements of the human experience that are arguably present in all of these different stories. And the result is a sort of interesting blend that emphasizes historical uniqueness, but also provides something sort of experientially valuable to the reader. And I think this one is a really remarkable example of that, because it is a story that really does really capitalizes on the alien, the strange, this idea of the culture clash as something really kind of fascinating and sort of difficult to reconcile. Something that does not pretend that, like, the Mexica people and the Castilians are just kind of, the same characters in different costumes. There is a real sense of the, like, deep underlying cultural differences, and the way that the experiences of these peoples have shaped them to have different expectations, while still sort of having these kind of core shared elements. The kind of imperial dream of the title is still something present in both cultures, even though they are so different and have these kind of fascinatingly different cultural touchstones and experiences and all that sort of stuff. And I think that's part of why I liked this book so much, is that it is really fascinating and really capitalizes on that idea in the way that, like, a lot of the really great historical fiction that I've read this past year and further back does really well. I was thinking a lot about Mary Renault's Alexander trilogy that I loved so much, that I think does something similar in its ability to convey all of the ways that the ancient world is very strange and different to us, and also that these are still, people who have their kind of, enough commonalities for us to understand them, and sort of attempt to inhabit their world and their culture and all that. And this does a similar thing that is, I think, really fascinating and well done, alongside a kind of wonderfully psychedelic experience of the sort of strangeness of this particular, Tenochtitlan in 1519. And in particular, one of the details, the sort of historical details that is interesting, is this idea that a lot of the Aztec delicacies in terms of food have some elements of psychoactive components, I guess, the various kind of like peppers and mushrooms and things like that, that for the locals, right, the priests are sort of high all the time, and there's different kind of levels of that. But the Spanish have no like developed resistance to that, and so it's a really kind of interesting inversion of the sort of the other versions of the sort of cross-cultural and developed resistances, especially with disease. This idea that, well, when the Spanish first arrived, they're sort of out of their minds, experiencing this world that they themselves have very few kind of touchstones to understand, but also are like just high from these weird mushroom stews and stuff, and are sort of struggling with the scale and the splendor and the evidence of human sacrifice and all of these different things that are so difficult for them to wrap their heads around, that really adds to that kind of strangeness. And then there are other kind of subtle sort of historical foreshadowings and strange little details, these sort of hallucinatory experiences of the future history of Mexico, that are really fascinating and wonderful, and such a interesting way to kind of lead into the larger history, the later history of the world as it is shaped by the events that are happening in Tenochtitlan in the relatively short period covered directly by the book. Anyway, all of that is to say, this is a really fascinating and interesting book that I haven't said that much about what happens, partly because not that much happens, but there are some plot elements. Not it's not a plot heavy book, I would say, but it's also not a super long book, so that sort of happens. But a fascinating and really excellent sort of novella, short novel, I guess, about this particular very tense historical period. Um, there's one scene that I remember that is Moctezuma is disturbed in his chambers, and he tells his serving girl to go find the guards and tell them that she is slated for execution. And it's such a kind of incredible demonstration of power and the kind of disdain for the value of human life that is also reflected in the way that some of the conquistadors, especially Hernan Cortez, but all the conquistadors on some level, but especially Cortez, has this kind of complete disdain for the value of the existence of other beings, basically, that is so startling and striking in this particular story, that is part of why it is so much fun to read. So, yeah, You Dreamed of Empires, really great stuff. Sons of El Rey, also really great. Check out both of them because they are both quite good. Um, yeah, but that is going to be it for me for today. If you have read either of these, one or the other, or both, or have any comments or questions or whatever else, feel free to leave a comment down below. Otherwise, I've been live from Pellam's Wasteland, and I will see you next time. Take care, everybody.